Welcome back. Sorry, I'm not sure what happened. We should be up on YouTube now. Let me double check. But yeah, thank you for Burke for coming on, talking about little Indiana basketball. Again, it's Friday night. Let's talk about whatever you guys want to talk about. There's nothing we got set in stone. We can talk about Purdue if you want. We can talk about the basketball team, the football team. Pro Day was today for the Illini. But up next, I'm going to introduce a very special person at CEO Hayes. He's a guy who I've been very fond of for a couple of years and who probably didn't know I even existed. But Hayes, if you don't mind, let the folks know who you are.
Yeah, my name's Hayes. I am host of Chicago Bulls Central, Chicago Bears Central, and Locked On Bulls. So I do a lot of coverage of Chicago teams.
Yeah, so obviously I'm a big Bulls fan. I'm a big Bears fan, and so when it comes to YouTube content creators, Hayes does such a fantastic job with his network, and so one of the go-to guys. So if you're also a fan, obviously you're here because you're an Illini fan, but if you're a Bulls fan, he's got an entire network that I wasn't really aware of beforehand. He has a Blackhawks channel. He's got a Cubs and White Sox channel. Definitely give my dude a follow and a subscribe. I'll leave the link in the descriptions at some point. But today, I actually asked him to come on because him covering the Chicago Bulls and us covering the University of Illinois, I thought, who better to bring on to talk about Io and his what I consider jump in his third year now this season. Now, me personally, I couldn't believe that he fell as low as he did. Um, Watching him in college, I was like, all right, whoever drafts him is not going to get a superstar, but they're going to get a guy who's going to play in the NBA 6, 7, 8 years. He had the size, he's got the work ethic. I thought it was a no-brainer. And when the Bulls had a chance to get him, and we did, it was one of, I grew up during the Jordan years, but beyond that, it was one of the highlights of my life. So, Hayes, you tell me what your impressions of Io are.
I mean, like you laid it all out there. Hard worker, a player who initially made his kind of impact defensively, and we always knew kind of that offensive ability was there, right? And he was on a team with a lot of big time scorers, so he hadn't really gotten to develop that skill set. And then he came into this season after having a sophomore slump last season. Coming in there as a starting point guard last season for the Bulls, he was coming into a bench role and playing more off ball. And it's really seemed to unlock not only his game, but his patience. And he plays with a lot more poise now. And you just see that the way he intentionally moves out there on the basketball court, whether he has the ball, does not have the ball on the offensive end, pair that with the defense, has always really been solid. And now you're seeing take that leap. And if it wasn't for the leap that Kobe White's also made this season, Io's leap would be the one that's talked about the most as like the biggest and best thing for this Bulls team this season, because it's been legit. And it started off right, like he would have like the solid shoot nights where it's like 4 or 5, 6 shots, whatever, and he was effective in that. But he had the defense, and then once Zach LaVine went down and he stepped into the starting lineup, and there's times where we rely on Io almost as like our third scorer at certain points, and he stepped in and really thrived in whatever we've asked him to do, and it's been really good to see this season.
How hard was it for Io to develop the trust of Billy Donovan throughout this season?
I don't think it was that hard this season. I think because he did have that trust his rookie year, first defensively. Once Billy Donovan trusts you defensively, he adds to your role from that. I think even last year with the slump, I think everybody kind of recognized, like, okay, he's not going to be a point guard for us, and that's fine. But he still has a role on this team, and and as other players went down with injury, Billy Donovan naturally went back to him because he's trusted him in that before, and he's just that shooting is just taking off so much for him. But I don't think it was hard for Billy Donovan to trust him. I just think that they try to put him in a role that was better suited to his strengths, and it's worked out for him.
So, coming into at the end of last year, I thought we had seen the last of Io in a Bulls uniform. He had his struggles, and I
Mm.
wasn't sure whether the Bulls were going to pay him or not. And ultimately, they obviously did, which for me, I thought it was a pretty solid deal on both sides. But now the way he's been playing, it's turned out to be one of the better values in the NBA. I'm curious your thoughts. Obviously his game has grown a little bit in
Mm.
Levine's absence. What do you think, if you had to guess, like his ceiling is? Because tonight he's putting in 20 points a night every now and then, but then he follows it up with an 11-point night on a 2 for 11 shooting day. Do you think he's a starter on a championship team, or do you think he's kind of a rotation guy off the bench?
I think it depends on how the rest of that line. I'm not going to say he's just a starter on every team in the NBA. I think it depends on what the rest of that lineup looks like. I think he's in a unique situation where I could definitely see him starting next to Kobe, but mainly because of the way that their games fit each other. Kobe's no slouch defensively, but he's not the defender Io is, but Kobe's amazing offensively. And then you have the flip side of that. Io's no slouch offensively, but he's amazing defensively. You could bet on him every single night. And I think both those players have positional size as well in length. And I think that if Io and Kobe are the Bulls starting backcourt, I don't have any problem with that, depending on how you flesh out the rest of the roster and starting lineup at that point.
Looking at the Bulls for the future, I know there's still work to be done, possibly a play-in game this year. But do you think Io sticks around this entire contract for the Bulls, or do you think he is prime trade bait to get something that the Bulls truly want in a draft, or even another star if they pair him with another younger player?
So one thing about our president of basketball operations, Arturas Karnisova, is that he typically, if you look at what he did with Denver, he didn't give up on Jamal Murray throughout all those injuries and things like that. He's typically somebody, if you draft, unless you like completely fall off a cliff, if he drafts you, he's going to keep betting on you. And with the way Io's playing, I don't think he's draft bad. I think they're going to continue to look to because at the worst, you're going to get a high level bench player that's on a reasonable contract. It'd be different if his contract was bad or something like that. I don't see them sending Io out in just about any deal. Now that may be for the better or worse for the team. That remains to be seen. But just from what I know about this front office and how I've studied them, I don't think they're going to give up on on Io anytime soon.
You said you studied this front office, so I need you to kind of talk me off the ledge here. When we're talking about this team getting better,
Mm-hmm.
it looks like we're going to re-sign DeMar. That's the vibes that I'm getting. We keep bringing Vooch back, despite his faults. And I just don't, like everyone else in Bulls Nation, like I don't see that sense of urgency from our front office and our ownership that they want to build a championship team, that they're going to do whatever it takes to win championships in Chicago. Because, I grew up as a kid in the 90s. Bulls championships were in my DNA, literally almost. So you tell me what the rosy, optimistic forecast is if you were the general manager.
Here's what I'll say and all your concerns are completely valid and they're reasonable, but this is the way that I look at it and think this is also a possibility. When this front office came in, they made the trade for Nikola Vucevic. That team would have made the playoffs that year. We were on pace to make the playoffs, and then Zach LaVine went down with COVID, and he missed the last 2 weeks, like last 12, 15 games. We ended up missing the playoffs. But that glimpse made that front office in an offseason that they had no cap space. They went out and got DeMar. They went out and got Alex Cruz. They went out and got Lonzo Ball, and they transformed the team. Now, they've rebounded terribly since then. That team came into that first season, first 35 games, number one team in the Eastern Conference. They wouldn't have stayed that, but there was a really solid foundation laid there. And then I think when Lonzo Ball went down, there was some real hope that Lonzo was going to come back. And so they kind of kicked the can down the road with hopes that when Lonzo came back, they were going to be able to pick back up where they left off, added some things to the team, and then kick off. It didn't happen. And I would say that with now the flashes that not even flashes, the growth that Io and Kobe have shown that are young pieces, part of your rotation going forward, that I think that may reinvigorate this front office this offseason to really take a look. And I know I get why you say that it seems like they're going to re-sign DeMar. To me, the way I see it is that if you were far apart on years and money to the point to where you just stopped negotiating and now you're fighting for a 9th seed, I don't think that that's going to alone make them all of a sudden want to pay DeMar DeRozan, a 34-year-old player, upwards of $20 million. I do think that they're going to be more aggressive. I think they're going to file the career-ending injury exception for Lonzo Ball, which is going to put $20 million back on their books. And I think they're going to take a real hard look. They have their own first-round pick this year. They have a future first-round pick with Portland. Technically, the Bulls going into this offseason have more assets available and more money available than what they had when they added DeMar, Caruso, and Lonzo. So I think that there's that lane. I'm not saying for sure that they're going to take it, but I think that there is that path to where they can be a little bit more aggressive this offseason than what a lot of Bulls fans are thinking.
Now, looking at how content that this Bulls ownership group has been with the Chicago Bulls of just being in a play-in game,
Mm.
how long does that actually last? Is it 2 more years, like where Billy Donovan would be safe, where Arturis would be safe? Like, what is the leash like for the guys up top?
Well, ownership. The only mandate ownership has is don't pay the luxury tax. I don't think that ownership isn't as involved as the day to day, as what a lot of us fans think. It really does come down to that front office, that president of basketball operations, the GM. So we typically, if you get a president operations role with the Chicago Bulls, you're there 10 years. So I don't think there's any time soon and that's going to happen. Now, if the Bulls keep disappointing, I do think Billy Donovan can go in the hot seat. I think there's going to be 2 to 3 more years before we get to that point. So I think that that's the next path that you're looking at. 2 to 3 more years, and then I think if whatever changes they have don't work, that's the point where you going to start seeing some changes first in that coaching staff, and then once that coaching situation flips, that's then where I think the clock starts ticking on that front office, that the ownership are going to look at doing something maybe different. They probably still have another 2 or 3 years after that, but I think that may be what starts that ball rolling.
Now you're following this team every single day. You're creating content every single day, sometimes twice a day. What's the first move that you would make? Like, what do you think that needs to happen just to kind of set things, beyond just trying to make the playoffs, beyond just trying to, your goal being a 7 or 8 seed? I'm talking about trying to win a championship.
I mean, I think the first thing you have to do is you have to clear the books as much as you can, meaning Lonzo Ball's contract was the first thing. As soon as the season ends, if there's any doubt he's going to be ready to full participant by training camp, even before the draft, I'm filing for the exception. That's $20 million back in a season where you can already have about $30 million in cap space, depending on how you maneuver some things. So that can pitch you closer to $40-50 million. I think that's the first thing that I'm doing. And not that cap space necessarily means you're signing free agents, but that gives you an opportunity to absorb other contracts, things like that. I think that's the first thing that I would look at. And then I have to take a hard look at what is the roster that my players are telling us that we need. Right now, the Bulls are trying to play a style that a lot of the players on this roster are telling you it doesn't fit their skill set. The Bulls are better when they play with pace. They're better when they get out quick. So I'm looking at players that fit that play style to kind of, again, lay the foundation, build on top of that in subsequent years. So I know we like to think, hey, let's do everything that's going to get us to a championship team, but I like to always think that there's steps there. Before you can build a championship team, you have to have a foundation of identity, of a core that's at least guaranteed to get you to the playoffs. You build that first, and you make sure you have that there. And then you start taking the home run hits after you have that solid foundation, because at that point you've already built a solid playoff team.
Doing a little research while we're on the air, but how much Illini basketball have you watched this year?
This year, not as much, mainly because the Bears and the Bulls have kept me extremely busy. If you would have asked me that last year, I think I missed maybe 4 games of Illini basketball last year, but this year not as much because between the Justin Fields situation, I covered both teams every single day, and this has been one of those seasons where I have not gotten to watch nearly as much college basketball as I want to.
I still think you're good enough to answer this question, but going into the NBA, what do you think of Coleman Hawkins and Terrence Shannon Jr. as NBA prospects?
Terrence Shannon Jr. is somebody I've been looking at very, very heavily because I would love to see him on this team, this Bulls team. I'm not gonna lie to you, and I think that he's gonna have to work on either that jump shot, that 3-point shot, to kind of stretch out a little bit more. But I think as a prospect of what you look at, yeah, he's a little bit older, but I think that his floor is so high that especially in what's supposed to be a weaker draft, I wouldn't hesitate to take him in the first round at all. I wouldn't hesitate to take him in that. I know what he's slated in a lot of mocks ago. I think like top 12, top 15, something like that. I wouldn't even say if you're 10 and you have the right roster, I wouldn't mind reaching on him at all. And Coleman, I think they're both really good prospects. I think that they have some skill sets that are going to translate right away, and if you can have the patience and the framework to develop some of the other things in their game, you can get hell of a prospects out of those guys.
If any of you guys watching have any questions for myself, Austin, or Hayes, drop them in the chat. He's going to be here for a couple more minutes. And Hayes, if you don't mind, I was thinking of kind of shifting gears a little bit to the other team that you're covering, because as you said, between the Bulls and the Bears, there's really no offseason whatsoever. Right now, if you had to guess, gun to your head, is Caleb Williams our quarterback next year, or is it going to be Justin?
Man, if I had to guess, the way things seem like they're leaning right now via the media and other things, it seems like it's a foregone conclusion that it's going to be Caleb Williams. Not that that's what I would want to see, but it does seem like that's the way things are going.
Why do you say that's not necessarily what you want to see? So let me ask you formally, what would you like to see?
So one thing I don't miss, I actually live in Columbus, so I am a huge OSU fan, so maybe that jades me a little bit. But I have seen what Justin Fields can look like when he actually has time. He's had a terrible offensive line and a terrible offensive coordinator the whole time he's been here. And I think because of that, I've seen the raw skill in Justin Fields, giving him more weapons in a Marvin Harrison Jr., shoring up that offensive line, getting him an offensive coordinator that actually can dynamically call plays. We didn't run slant routes last year. We have one of the quickest wide receivers in Darnell Mooney. We didn't run any slant routes last year. And so our route trees in general were just completely stagnant. Like Luke Getsy is just not a good offensive play caller. He's just not. And so I would love to see what Justin Fields looks like with somebody that we know is a competent offensive play caller and is going to spread that ball around. I would love to see that. And that to me is why I lean toward, not that I don't knock Caleb Williams as a prospect. It's just that I think with the right scenario and situation that there's still a heck of a player in Justin Fields, and he's really dynamic. And I think that you can get that haul back for the number 1 overall pick that people rumor and talk about and really build this thing out. And I think you can get much better than what we've seen out of Justin Fields. But I also understand you're put in the situation as the front office that you may not be able to pass this up. I don't think that if this front office did not have the number 1 overall pick, they wouldn't even think about trading Justin Fields. They think about building this thing out, and that's kind of why I lean that way also.
What do you think the Bears do in free agency?
I went over this recently on one of the shows. So, like, I know a lot of people have the thought process or the hope that the Bears are going to make these big trades and things like, or big signings, these A-list free agent signings. And we got $44 million in cap space after our extension of JJ and the trade. So I think it's going to be kind of what he did last year. Like, he had one big signing in Tremaine Edmonds as far as a big contract. And then there was a lot of guys that looked at as B-list. TJ Edwards was technically looked at as a B-list. And he had over 100 tackles. So I think it's going to be a lot of the quality signings. And I think that maybe fans may think it's a little underwhelming because it doesn't have the big names. But I think he's going to add a lot of quality depth in this offseason for the Chicago Bears, and that we're going to have one of those defenses that really propel this team forward a lot.
Austin's an Eagles fan, so he doesn't quite understand what Bears misery really, really feels like.
That's fair.
Outside the quarterback issue, which obviously is arguably the biggest storyline in the NFL offseason right now, one of my biggest concerns is we only have 5 draft picks.
Mm-hmm.
And this is supposed to be, from everything I've gathered, a pretty deep draft all around. Do you see us with that number 9 pick staying there, or do you think the idea is to maybe trade down, get either a lower first rounder and add a second or a third or fourth? Do you think that Ryan Poles is going to be as interested in getting more draft picks like I think they should be?
Well, I think that I understand why you say that, and that's definitely a possibility. But I think when you look at what Ryan Poles did the last 2 drafts, in 2022, turning 5 picks into 9 picks, getting a lot more picks, trading down a couple of times in last year's draft. But I think that was a team that was clearly at the start of a rebuild where they needed so many more bites at the apple. This is now a team that, for example, in your defense, you got two holes on your defense, and then you have a pretty solid defense. You need an edge. You need a new safety after the release of Eddie Jackson. And I think that, he's going to get another pick regardless, because either you're trading Justin or you're trading the number one overall pick. I think the Bears covet a pick in the second round where they can get a starting center. But outside of that, I can fully see them operating just with what they have in the draft, because they don't need as much as what they've needed in the previous years to really build something that can be that playoff foundation for the Bears.
What are your vibes on Ryan Poles right now?
I think Ryan Poles is a genius. I'm not gonna pull any punches there. Ryan Poles is a genius. He's probably the most intentful GM we've had in Chicago in my lifetime. 37 years in this planet. I don't think we've ever had a GM that really has an idea on the type of team that they want to build and executes it. Like when we let Roquan go, I don't know if you watched Bear Central then, I was pissed. Like I literally thought it was one of the stupidest deals possible. You then end up replacing Roquan Smith with two linebackers that got paid less than Tremaine Edmonds and TJ Edwards, and both had their time periods where they were leading the NFL in tackles. So I think that Ryan Poles is somebody who's earned my trust, and once you earn my trust, you'll have to do something stupid to take it away. And yeah, he's had his misses. The Chase Claypool one was a miss, but then he learned from that this year and made sure he got a player in Montez Sweat with a second round pick and locked him up to an extension. So Poles is somebody to me that learns from his own mistakes. He holds himself accountable, and he really does have a vision of what he wants this team to be, and he's executing it amazingly.
Where does the Bears quarterback situation with Caleb Williams or Justin Fields rank in the NFC North at the beginning of next year?
That's tough. We have one of the better divisions in football. I think with Kirk Cousins all but leaving the division, it definitely opens up a lane there as well. But I think that it's going to be one of the more important decisions in the division, because that could be what separates you. And so I think that the quarterback situation is going to have its questions. I don't think Caleb Williams is the perfect prospect that some people try to make him out to be. That's more the media than fans. But I think it's going to be one that all eyes are going to be on, because you need to get this right, and if you get it right, it can really create some separation, because you already have the defense and the bones of a team that can really compete in that division.
All right, Hayes, I didn't want to keep you too long. Thanks for coming on tonight. And once again, if you don't mind, let the folks know where they can find you.
Absolutely. You can follow me personally at CEO Hayes. That's CEO HAIZE on every social media platform. I try to keep it simple. It's the same everywhere. If you want to follow either of my shows, it's Bull Central Pod on every social media platform, or it's Shy Bear Central on every social media platform and YouTube and every podcasting app if you guys want to check us out on podcasts as well.
We appreciate your time today, and
Appreciate it.
hopefully this is not the last time we come on, and maybe we'll talk a little more Bears and Bulls in the future.
Anytime, man. Anytime. Thanks for having me.
All right, brother. You take care.
All right, peace.
Austin, sorry to bore you with Bears talk, but we're the attention of the NFL right now.
It's got to be nice having that opportunity. I mean, whenever the Eagles had traded up from number 8 to number 2 to get Carson Wentz, I mean, that was an exhilarating time period. And to have your pick of the ball this time around with Caleb Williams and Drake May and Jaden Daniels, or a free agent, or maintaining Justin Fields and growing a roster around him. I mean, there is so many opportunities and so many different formulations on how that can be done. So it's got to be fun, like going to your buddies and talking about everything that the Bears can do. And this is a situation that the Bears haven't been in a long, long time, or if ever, for the quarterback position. I mean, the last time you drafted really, really high, you drafted um, Cedric Benson, I think it was, naturally.
Mitch.
I mean, you had to trade up to get Mitch Trubisky, of course, but
Yeah.
that was more of a draft day surprise. But to be in this position where you're leading up to having this pick, I mean, that's got to be awesome.
All right. Put your Bears hat on. What do you do with that number 1 pick?
Oh, I'm taking Caleb Williams. I'm sorry, Hayes. I'm sorry. I've seen what I've seen from Justin Fields. I've heard a bunch of people being like, well, he could be the next Jalen Hurts. Well, I mean, he hasn't been the next Jalen Hurts yet. So I know the Eagles have a better roster around Jalen Hurts than Justin Fields has in Chicago, but there are moments where Jalen Hurts has won the Eagles football games, and I have not seen that from Justin Fields to this point. I think you need to start with a guy that has some characteristics of a guy like Patrick Mahomes out there. And I think you got to bite the bullet. And if you miss, then hey, everybody would have missed. All 32 teams would have missed. But you don't want to be the one team that thought they were smarter than 31 other teams. And that's what you risk whenever you keep Justin Fields and trade the Caleb Williams pick to somebody.
Yeah, I keep going back and forth, whether with what I want to kind of do with this draft pick, and leave a comment in the chat with what you would do. For me, it's like originally I wanted to stick around with Justin Fields. Obviously my wife, she went to Ohio State, so it's a team I always kind of passively watch. I'm pretty sure I've seen every game that Justin Fields played in, and so I do have a certain affinity towards him. And I was super happy and excited when the Bears decided to trade up and draft him. And I see what Hayes talked about. Like, he's never had a good offensive coordinator. Our offensive line was in shambles last year. But I also see the flaws. Like, I see the idea that he holds on to the ball too long, and he doesn't really always get to his second, much less third read when it comes to offense. So for me, I thought I was a big Ryan Poles fan, and apparently Hayes is, an even bigger fan than I am. Whatever decision we ultimately make at quarterback, I think I'm going to be super happy with it, because if it's Justin Fields, that means we got a whole bunch of assets, a whole bunch of draft picks, a whole bunch of young guys in our trade of Caleb Williams. And so that team itself that's going to surround Justin's going to be considerably better. And obviously we've made a move on the offensive coordinator side, hiring Shane Waldron, who, I mean, he's got to be an upgrade over what Getsky gave us. But then if it's Caleb Williams under center, then that means Ryan Poles, a guy who I'm sitting here on the show right now telling you I trust, got to watch his film. He sees Justin his entire career at this point, and he's decided that, it's time that to, and it's not the worst idea to kind of restart that QB clock too. That QB contract clock. Basically, you have a 21-year-old Caleb. You keep Justin Fields, that's fine. But then in a year, you're going to have to start committing serious money to him. And again, I don't know if even the most ardent, supportive, Justin Fields stan is going to say that he deserves a 180, $200 million contract. So it's just one of those where I just keep going back and forth, trying to decide. And I've decided to not stress about it and just wait for, Adam Schefter to tweet out that for sure the Bears have traded Justin, or the Bears are trading the number one overall pick. Like it happened pretty much a year ago today.
I mean, I know you'll get a lot more picks for the number one overall pick, but you have 5 draft picks right now. You trade Justin, that gets you to 7. So that gives you the bare minimum of a normal NFL draft without any trades taking place. So I do think trading Justin Fields would be still a great option. And then you have your second pick in the first round. Who's to say that you can't trade up if there's a team that wants to trade back and you can get Marvin Harrison Jr. hypothetically to pair up with Caleb Williams? I mean, there are possibilities where you can still get Caleb Williams and beef up your offense around him at the same exact time. And you have a bunch of salary cap space right now. So there is a lot of options to improve the roster around Caleb Williams and beef it up, have a better quarterback, and still be in a position where you can make some noise next year. Look at what the Houston Texans did last year by drafting Will Anderson Jr. and CJ Stroud back to back. I didn't think that was possible watching that NFL draft, but it happened. And the Texans made the playoffs in their first year with CJ Stroud and with Will Anderson. The Bears can do something similar with 2 extremely potent offensive talents.
I think seeing Stroud perform the way he did in his rookie year is what kind of has me a little more open to moving on from Justin, because you're talking about the same system. They play differently, sure, but in college, they're both, Stroud just followed up Justin. And to see Stroud like just throwing for almost, I think he threw for 4,000 yards this year, whereas Justin's struggling to hit 2,500 for the season. And I guess I know that there's issues and reasons why, but I don't know. It's we'll see. Again, I think we still have like a month and a half before the.
I hate how long the draft process is in the NFL. I mean, you talk in circles a lot, and there's just not that much conversation that can take place if you're talking about it every day. We have the luxury where we can talk about it a few times on a podcast and still a lot of content. But I feel so bad for those daily Bears podcasts that have to talk about this every single day leading up to the draft.
Yeah, I mean, they do a fantastic job. I don't know how they do it. And you and I, we throw out like 2 or 3 episodes of this a week, and I feel like we're pretty much tapped out. But all credit to them. But speaking of the draft, a couple months ago, Johnny Newton was kind of listed possibly going top 10, first defensive tackle drafted, and now I just see him falling sometimes even out of the first round. And obviously, he just had some sort of surgery. I forget what exactly it was, but I don't know about you, but I think some team is going to get an absolute steal in drafting Johnny.
Oh my gosh, yeah. I mean, injuries are probably the number one factor why a guy would fall as fast and as hard as Johnny Newton has. But I mean, at some point, you just got to trust the medicals of of the player and be like, hey, we believe this guy can stay healthy. I mean, look at the burden that he had on the University of Illinois defensive line. He was sometimes the only guy that was making plays. I mean, think of that Penn State game. Going back to that game, what he was able to accomplish. He took advantage of Olu Fashunu. I butchered that name, I know, but he absolutely massacred him, and he's going to be one of the top offensive linemen taken in this draft. And Johnny Newton was able to get whatever he wanted to in that game. I know there was a lot of tiredness after the interceptions that were thrown by Illinois, but my goodness, you see the talent that he has. I would trust him. The investment isn't going to be that great if he's only able to play a couple years of top football if injuries do become a concern. But I would take those. I would take that short prime over a lot of guys in this draft.
Yeah, I mean, I hope he's a target if the Bears do decide to move on from number 9, or who knows, if they decide to move on from that number 1 overall pick to kind of get a collection of more draft picks. We do need defensive line help, and I think a guy like Johnny, who obviously we watched almost every snap of his in college football, so we know what kind of motor he has, and we know that not only is he dominant on the field, but he wants to be dominant. Like it takes a certain sort of mentality to want to be better, and he just is one of the kind of like Io, what we just kind of let off the conversation with. He's got a very similar mindset where, to me, I don't think it's as long as he's healthy. I obviously don't have access to those medical records, but I think if his health comes in check, I think some NFL teams are going to get a really good value if he keeps dropping in mock drafts the way I'm seeing him drop.
I mean, you have to have a certain level of swagger if you're a great player at Illinois because you have to try to lift the spirits of your teammates a lot of times. It hasn't been that pretty for Illinois football as of late. But I mean, you look at a guy like Nick Allegretti, who has a strong confidence in himself. He has a swagger about him. Devin Witherspoon is the ultimate swagger machine for the Seattle Seahawks. Same with Kirby Joseph. The list goes on. Sidney Brown has some swagger in himself. And Johnny Newton has that same swagger. And I think that if he's in an NFL locker room, he just naturally makes people better just by his attitude as well. So I think a team would get a hell of a locker room piece as well as what he can accomplish on the field for your team.
So today's Friday, was the Illinois Pro Day, and I don't know, Austin, if you've been kind of keeping tabs, but apparently Casey Washington, who wasn't invited to the combine, he had a pretty decent day himself. Do you think he's an NFL guy?
He was in the East West Shrine game and he impressed pretty well there as well. That's the college all star game, probably second tier to the Mobile, Alabama Senior Bowl, and had a pretty good practice week and game in that Shrine Bowl, and I think he's a fourth to sixth round pick. It would not shock me if that's kind of where he would land, even without being invited to the combine. I just feel like he has a lot of intangibles, and if he is going to these different mini camps before the draft and in the training camp afterwards, I think he can make his way onto a roster. Start with special teams. Start with that hard nosed mentality that we see Casey Washington have. That no BS attitude, and when he has that range to just develop as a player, we've seen it before with Illinois guys taking a little bit of time, like a Matt Lacoste kind of situation. He can make a name for himself in the NFL, and we're gonna see that was touchdown by slot receiver Casey Washington. Extra points good. I mean, I think we'll see that someday in the NFL. I don't know when, but I think we'll see it one day.
What's nice though is, like, I think I saw a mock draft, and I think we had like four guys projected to be drafted, and obviously we had, I think, what, six last year in the draft. Ultimately, three in the first top 70
Mhm.
picks. That was something that just wasn't happening, especially in the latter part of the Lovey year. So it's it brings me a little satisfaction to know that not only are we bringing some talent in, but that talent is getting better, and gives me a little hope, because obviously you and I, we kind of talk about how when it comes to recruiting and offensive recruiting rankings, it's not to the level that both you and I want it to be. And yeah, we have to be a little patient with it, but I'm willing to be more patient with it because I see that the coaching staffs that we have is able to develop that talent, compared to the one beforehand where it was just, I didn't know what to look forward to.
Right. I mean, some of these guys were Lovey Smith recruits. Most of them were, and yet Brett has taken them to a next level. I don't think that development would have happened with Lovey Smith, where you would have seen these guys get drafted. I think they would have fallen off at some point. Um, but going forward with Brett Bielema, I really feel like he'll have a shot. So I've got to be excited about what's taking place here, especially with the transfers they've brought in this offseason. But a topic that might impact Illini sports was the news out of Carbondale today. That was Brian Mullins was fired by the Southern Illinois Salukis, and I think all three of these Illini assistants might be an option for this job because you look at three factors. Number one, Chester Frazier. He's kind of ready for that next step in his coaching career, and I think that's a mid-major coaching job. You look at Tim Anderson, who has all of the developmental tools that a coaching staff would that a coaching staff, that an athletic director would love to see out of a coaching staff. And then you have Jeff Alexander, who might be a little bit more green, but you look at the connections that he has in the state of Illinois and the way these directional schools plus Illinois State are going to win and get to the NCAA tournament, it's going to have to be on the backs of in-state talent, like from the likes of a Leroy, from the likes like a Champaign Centennial, from the likes of a Chicago suburb team or downtown city of Chicago. I mean, it always sucks that you see a guy like from like Aurora and he's like, "Oh, I'm going to Colorado State," and it's like, where was SIU? Where was Illinois State? Where was EIU, WIU? Where were they at to try to get this talent? So I think having that extreme in-state connection with the family, like the last name of Alexander, I think that would do really well for Southern Illinois.
Yeah, I mean, I don't obviously follow that program. You live closer to it, so you catch games certainly more often than I do. But for me, as an outsider, from what I saw, like, I think they were projected to finish eighth or something in the conference this year, and they finished. They were like right in it, right until the end. Am I? Am
They
I?
finished sixth.
Oh, they finished sixth. Okay, so they may have struggled
Yeah.
then at the end. Like, for me, it's just, his records seem kind of decent. He's one of their own. He is a Saluki. So for me, it's, while I think it's a great job, I don't know, or I guess I'm kind of curious if the expectations might be a little too high. I agree with you. I think would be a great job for Chester Frazier. I don't know if he's interested in it. Like, I don't know if he wants to go back east, or what his ultimate plans are. But it's right down the road. I think he's number one when it
He's
comes to
got a
like.
connection with Bruce Weber.
Mhm. Oh, right, yeah, exactly. I think he's ready. Of the three guys that we have on our staff, I think he's clearly the most ready to become a head coach, and it could very well happen this offseason. I'll be honest with you, I would probably take the SIU job over I would the DePaul job, even, just because that DePaul
Yeah.
job's just kind of seems hopeless. But I guess for me, it's just I would really need to vet the administration. And again, maybe you can speak on this a little bit more than I can about whether the expectations of that job are a little too high, and whether 19-20 wins apparently isn't enough.
So here's kind of the two schools of thought on the SIU fans. There's the one tier of fans that are like, well, we're SIU. We were making Sweet 16s. We're a number 4 seed, which is crazy to think of for a Missouri Valley program being a number 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. But it's not that way anymore. When you have schools that can take a Lance Jones and take a Marcus Damask, things change. And we will never see SIU be at the heights for that long that they were. But there's also another school of thought here. All those other Missouri Valley teams have the same struggles of keeping and maintaining talent and developing talent. And SIU is still falling a little bit below their peers in the Missouri Valley. I think what a lot of SIU fans want is to just at least make the semifinals consistently in the Missouri Valley tournament. And whenever you make the semifinals consistently, one of those times is going to break. Like we talk about it with Major League Baseball teams, like just get enough bites of the apple, get enough bites of the apple. I mean, you look at the Los Angeles Dodgers, they've only had one World Series, but they've been consistently a part of the conversation. So SIU just wants to be essentially a part of the conversation all the time, like Bradley, like Drake, like Northern Iowa. Um, and Indiana State, this is a little bit different of a situation. It was a quick rebound with a extremely great luck in the transfer portal, but that's what SIU fans want. They want to be Bradley and they want to be Drake, and right now they are not that program.
Shout out Jackson. Really good guy. 60 more subs until you guys get to 500. We got about 21 people watching right now. So, yeah, if you don't mind, just hit that like button. Or if you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Austin and I, we do our best to kind of provide you content when we can. It just, YouTube doesn't really recognize us until we hit that 1,000 subs mark. And one of our goals is to hit that mark by the end of the college basketball season. So, appreciate you saying hello, Jackson. If you got some time, you can look up his show. It's called The Jacksonian. I was actually a guest on it a couple months back. Jackson does a fantastic job interviewing some of the bigger names that you're going to find in media and content creation, and definitely check him out. Jackson's a fantastic creator that you're going to find on YouTube. So, Austin, let's talk about what we really want to talk about. It's opening day in what, 20 days, I think.
Yes.
You and I
We'll
we're both.
see. We'll see opening day for Major League Baseball overall on the 20th for the Soul Series between the San Diego Padres and the Los Angeles Dodgers. So, if you're on a fantasy baseball team, if you own a fantasy baseball team, might want to set your lineups at midnight the night before, so you don't have to wake up at 3 in the morning to set your lineups. But yeah, 21 days for the Chicago Cubs, and I was at a 4 most of this offseason without Cody Bellinger. There was a very real possibility that he signs with the Los Angeles Angels or some other team. And I now that he's back, now we have the prospects. It feels like 2015 again, where you see the opening in the division, you see what talent they have, and there's still opportunities to add. I mean, the Cubs are still rumored for Jordan Montgomery as well, so he would be a number 2 starter for Justin Steele. So I am excited about what the Chicago Cubs roster can do. I've seen MLB Network's Greg Amsinger say 4th. I've seen another say 2nd. I just don't see the depth on any other team in the NL Central to do what they did and to do what the Cubs can do. But in the Milwaukee Brewers, they lost their secret weapon in Craig Counsell to where the Chicago Cubs. So I think this is Cubs division to lose, and if they do lose, then Jed Hoyer has some serious questions that need to be answered.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I've been super patient with Jed, and it obviously took a really long time for Cody to sign, and there's a lot of group chats I was participating in saying, just pay the guy. Come on, let's go. We need him. We need him back just to equal our team from last year. We're not being aggressive enough. But I mean, let's be honest, Jed completely played Scott Boras with that deal. I mean, if you had told us we could get 3 years, 80 million back in November, we would have been high fiving. No brainer, we would have taken it. And now, kind of like you mentioned, I'm seeing the options for Jordan Montgomery just kind of slowly dwindle down. And I'm kind of
The
curious.
Rangers said that they will not, more than likely, not be signing him. I don't know if that's leverage or what, but if the Rangers are truly out, who's left?
Yeah, I mean, the Red Sox just lost a starting pitcher, so they may just be kind of throwing this season. Like they may not have incentive to sign Montgomery if they don't think they're going to be competing. And then here we are, just kind of lurking in the shadows like we did with Cody. I think, right now, I believe our over under is something like 84 and a half or 85 and a half, which, I mean, call me the eternal optimist. I tend to be when I talk about my teams, but I like the over on that. And in particular, if we're able to give Montgomery the kind of cloud deal that we got Cody from, I'm really looking forward because Matt Shaw has been smashing this ball in spring training right now. I don't know how closely you've been paying attention,
Yes.
but
He's like at a 287 average in spring training.
just driving in runs, and he's like one of those guys where obviously we have Morel at that third base spot, and Morel I think has got potential to be one of the best offensive players in baseball. But it's just nice seeing because we have a really good foundation of players. Seya's been killing it this spring training. Obviously, we have Swanson, Nico. We have a good base of players, and now that we brought Cody back, if we can, have a breakout from a, whether it's a PCA, a Shaw, it like you said, it kind of gives me that 2015 vibes where we have a solid, foundation there, just waiting for some of the young kids to elevate their games and kind of push us over the top. And I don't know if we're in the 2015 season right now or if we're in the 2016 season right now.
Uh, I don't think we're at the 2016 season, Sonny. I think there are some teams ahead of the Cubs that
We were one
just
game
have.
out. We were one game out from the playoffs last year, and the team that beat us out by that one game was Arizona that got to the World Series. So I don't know. With baseball, to me, I've always been of the mindset that just get in, give yourself a
Yep.
shot in the playoffs, and then the ball sometimes just bounces in weird and odd ways, and let the baseball gods decide who wins after that.
Yeah, you're right about that. I mean, I did just say that the Dodgers only have one World Series in a fake 2020 season after all the
Doesn't count.
attempts that they've gone. So, yeah, it doesn't count. But the Cubs just get in. I mean, the Cubs got in 2015 and 2016, 2017, and 2020. Correct. I think there was a couple seasons in there where they didn't make it. And 2018 they made it as well. So they made it all those years and they won one World Series. So the Cubs just get four appearances and the ball will probably bounce your way. And that needs to start this year.
Indeed, and again, just a 20 or some odd days left. I can't wait. We've got April 20th, I believe, is when Illinois spring football. Uh, we play our spring game. At least I think practices obviously start before that. Any storylines that you're paying attention to?
Gotta be honest, no, I've been paying most attention to this Illini basketball team. I'll probably dig in a little bit after bracket prep is done, where you get the couple odd days where you filled out your bracket and there's nothing to do until the first four. So I might be studying up on spring football during that short little time period.
Yeah, I guess I got my eye on the wide receiver room. I really want to see which one of those guys, obviously with Washington, who we talked about earlier, and Isaiah Williams going to the draft, we're going to need one of our young guys to really step up. And obviously, that transfer portal window is about to open up, that second one. So, are there going to be any more defections? Hopefully not. Brett's been pretty good about keeping the talent in house, but we've had some pretty drastic changes in our coaching staff. So, it's one of those that once that portal opens, we'll see. Obviously the Malik Elzy name has been dropped with George McDonald going down to Ole Miss. Those two are very close, but I also see a really bright future for Malik here if he continues to stay with the Illini. So that's the room for me that I really want to see development from. And I think, if one or two of those guys step up with a running back room, like the strength that we have of our running backs and how highly I hold, Altmaier, I think, our offense can be just fine and kind of make up for what I perceive as to be maybe not such a great defense.
Yeah, and I mean, I've heard reports that um, the wide receiver room is really gelling with the new wide receiver coach, Coach Stepp, and that's really awesome to hear slash see. So, really excited about the relationship that these new coaches are having, and I'm excited to hear what the players have to say about their new positional coach because that's going to be a huge factor on what happens with this transfer portal opening up. Is those relationships budding and if there are some hard heads battling, then that's when you start to see subtractions. But hopefully, you don't see many of those with the relationships that Brett Bielema likes to see with his coaches have with his players.
All right, Austin, final thoughts. Sunday, final game of the season against Iowa at Iowa. There's senior night. Do you think Illinois is putting a lot of weight in this game? Because honestly, I don't think so. I think we're locked in at number two, regardless. Iowa needs this game. A victory over us can probably vault them into the tournament. But what are your initial impressions?
I mean, the minutes of Terrence Shannon Jr. is probably what's gonna, and Marcus Damask and Coleman is probably gonna showcase what Brad Underwood thinks of this game. If he thinks of it as I don't want ring rust going into a area where you don't play a lot of basketball, um, where you're playing one game, not practicing much, and then you have the NCAA tournament. So I think it'll be like that third preseason game when there was four preseason games where the starters will play for a half or so and then sporadically in different random lineups in the second half. But on the opposite side of it, of my thoughts, I know that Brian Underwood never likes to lose, especially to Iowa. So I think he could still be like, all right, guys, balls to the wall. We're playing basketball. If there's a basketball and there's a clock that says 40 minutes, we're going to win those 40 minutes. So I think there's the two mindsets that are going to battle in Brian Underwood's mind.
Yeah, I really want to see I want to see at least 10 Nico minutes. I want to see DGL on the court. I really want to see if, like, Amani, if these guys are going to be able to get some meaningful minutes, not only in the Big Ten tournament, but in the actual NCAA tournaments that's going to be starting in a week and a half. Because right now I'm still kind of undecided. Nico played decently well against Purdue. He played a lot more minutes than I projected him to, but his ball handling skills are just something we need. DGL, he hasn't really gotten off the bench, for a few weeks now. It seemingly there's always the whispers that goes on with his, let's just say, family members on, how happy they are with his situation. But if you're one of those, reading body language vibes guys, he's in, all those post game videos, celebrations in the locker room. He seems like he's still locked into this team, and I certainly hope he is. But I think a game like Iowa, who just it's a team that doesn't play much defense. We just played them a couple weeks ago. They've won 4 out of 5, but that one loss was to us. And I think I mentioned it before. I think we're just kind of a better version of Iowa, just pure offense, and we just happen to have better players. So it's a game that we should win. I just don't know if the urgency is going to be there on our side to really secure victory, as opposed to let's just see what we have and get ready for the Big Ten tournament. That's going to, luckily for us, start Friday. I believe it's going to be a 5:30 tip off for the Illini next week.
Yeah, I mean, right now with the future, I mean, you think of a couple guys like Luke Goody. Why did he go through senior day festivities? But I do know he's a very academic mind and takes getting a diploma really seriously and all of that kind of stuff. So I think he was just generally proud of all of his efforts. And so I think he just kind of felt like a reward was deemed there for his particular work in the classroom. So I'm not looking too hard at that in terms of a transfer portal decision. And DGL, I mean, this is a guy that has done everything asked of him and hasn't really complained at all, in at least in the sources' minds of Illinois basketball. So I am kind of excited about what he can bring to the floor next year. And he's a guy that I was completely wrong on his mentality coming in, because I thought he was going to be a lot like a Sky Clark, like especially with his decommitment from Purdue and all of that. But it feels like he's just been a great teammate, and you hope a guy like that can stick around, because I feel like that'll be a good influence on future freshmen, especially with the talent level that Brad Underwood is bringing in. Like, you need a guy like DGL to be like, "Hey guys, I was in your position. If you buy in, then things are going to look pretty swimmingly for you by your junior year. Look at me, I'm starting, and good things are happening."
All right, I think that's about it. I don't know if you got anything else, Austin. Unlike
I do
what
not.
a fan base of another team thinks, I don't think the world is ending at all after our performance in that last game. I'm really looking forward to actually seeing how this team performs in the next couple weeks. I think Selection Sunday, which happens in what, nine days or so, is going to be huge. It's going to be something that I'll be paying very close attention to what bracket we're in, and who we're lined up to play against. You would think at some point the law of averages tells us that we're going to get a better matchup than unfortunately we've had to have the last couple of years. But until then, uh, if you got nothing else, we'll let you all go. Thanks for joining us on a Friday night. Again, this was just something a little bit different that Austin and I wanted to try. We didn't want to be in any sort of meltdown mode after that Purdue game, because genuinely, Austin and I are not in meltdown mode. It's one of those
No.
games. I think we just lost a very close game to the best team in the country, and that's okay. Good luck to them in March. I'm kind of focused on our own Illini, and who knows, we might be playing each other again.
We'll see them in the Final Four.
Yeah, or next Sunday. I mean,
Yep.
let's be honest. It could absolutely happen in the Big Ten tournament. I don't know how seriously both of these coaches are going to take it, with how physical this tournament tends to be, and like the performance of teams afterwards, at least from the last couple of years. But yeah, if you're watching this still, thanks for watching. Austin and I will have probably a season recap, at least regular season recap episode sometime early next week, and we'll kind of preview the Big Ten tournament. On your way out, if you don't mind, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button. We did have 2 new subscribers today during our watch, so we appreciate that. And Austin, you enjoy your weekend.
Absolutely. Drink some Riverlands Brewing Company beer for me, Sonny.
I shall. Take care, guys.